Program Director, former President Thabo Mbeki, the Speaker of our National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, the leaders of various political parties, Mmusi Maimane, Honorable, the Honorable General Bantu Holomisa, Honorable Hlengwa, and others that I may not have seen, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, the project leader, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, members of the steering committee, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It is for me a real pleasure to have been asked to be present here at the launch of this really outstanding process of the Indlulamithi scenarios. I was fortunate enough to have had a preview of the scenarios, as I guess many of you also had the same experience, and had a brief opportunity to engage with our colleagues on some of the thinking behind these scenarios. I was truly impressed by the depth of thinking as well as the intellectual rigor by the leaders and the key participants in this process. And I wished for them that as the Indlulamithi scenario process, they should not be like the giraffe that is interfered with by humans. I informed them that I have had an experience with a giraffe that was being transported from one place to another. And as giraffes are transported, they are blindfolded as they are put in various vehicles. Because they are so tall, they are blindfolded so that they do not be disturbed by the environment around them. And once they arrive at their destination, they are then delivered, and somehow they use some device to take off the blindfold. And in one case, I saw how a giraffe, after being transported to the spot where it was supposed to be, they couldn't remove the blindfold and it just ran away. Completely blindfolded, and it started knocking into a number of objects and obstacles. And I wished to the Indlulamithi process leaders that I hope that this process that they have started should never be interfered with by humans, and it should be left as it is, natural as it is, so that it can just unfold. Because if it is interfered with, it will be blindfolded. And we don't want this process to be blindfolded by any one of us, especially of all of us seated here, including you, Mmusi Maimane, and myself. I've always regarded scenario planning as largely focused on answering three questions. What could happen in the future? And it is this future that the Indlulamithi process is postulating about. The second question is, what would be the impact on our strategies, on our plans, and more importantly, on the population of our country, if something that they are postulating about eventuates? And more importantly, the third question is, how would we respond as leaders and as people of our country? And I'd like to regard this Indlulamithi process as not another Sangoma moment for our nation, where we look at what Sangomas often do and say, this is what can happen and this is what could happen. These scenarios, as far as I'm concerned, are a timely contribution to the debates that have been reignited throughout our country as we apply ourselves with renewed determination to the building of a more equal, more honest, and more united nation. I want to congratulate and thank the group of individuals from different walks of life who devoted time and got together in last year's winter of uncertainty, who seized the moment to begin building these thought-provoking scenarios. Your intervention in the end represents the conscious action by politically engaged and academically and theoretically advanced individuals amongst all of us as a nation to contribute to the creation of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society. It can be said that the past is often not a good predictor of the future. I do believe that scenario planning is an important process that we should get involved in as a nation to deal with the uncertainties of the future. And we should use scenario planning to help manage better and also understand the threats and opportunities that may lie ahead. There is unique value in an exercise like this, which presents the big picture from the perspective of a giraffe, a big picture about the complex interplay of economic, political, social, and cultural developments. And that helps us gaze into the future and what the future portends. Scenarios are about the multiple perspectives that strategic thinkers should use to help us defeat the tyranny of a lack of knowledge about the future. Too often, far-reaching policies are developed with a narrow and somewhat restricted view of reality, thus blinding us of what the future could portend. And this is done without proper consideration of the wider impact of the measures that we take. Very often, as citizens, as well as workers, business people, professionals, and consumers, we abdicate civic responsibility to the elected few and become cynical spectators of the game of nation building. We outsource this inherent responsibility that we have as citizens of our country and give it up to those who are elected, as though they are the ones who possess the greatest wisdom, as though they are endowed with great intellectual powers. In doing so, we reduce ourselves to armchair critics who merely curse the darkness while doing absolutely nothing about creating light. These scenarios provide an instrument that allows us to broaden our vision and to move from the armchair to the drawing board. And as South Africans, we should all yearn for the moment when as many of us, countrymen and women, young and old, rich and poor, wherever we are located in our country, should be more in the drawing board, planning and participating in how to shape the future of our country. This process challenges us to engage with the realities of our society in all its complexities. The various scenarios that the Indlulamithi is dealing with are scenarios that could happen to us. We could have a false dawn where we just have a gwara-gwara, and we could have any one of these scenarios. The important thing is what we all collectively can do to avoid a negative scenario. Scenarios bring home to us the fact that the future is a choice, not an inevitable fate. And we can all influence many of the choices that push our country in one direction or another. They reinforce the notion of agency, that as individuals and as a collective, we can act in ways that determine the course of history and the course of our country's future. While these scenarios are essentially concerned with a national vision that we should craft, our actions can have a broader impact on the continent and even much further. You will not agree with all the details of these 3 pictures that the Indlulamithi team has painted of our beloved country in 2030. That is not what you are meant to do. You are meant to wrestle with them. All of us are meant to engage with all these pictures that the Indlulamithi process is painting for us. We are meant to interrogate them to see how the links between actions and consequences could play out better. This process is offering us an opportunity to be a society that is engaged in robust discourse about its future and the shared dreams and visions and aspirations of its people. As exciting and compelling as this process is to develop these scenarios has been, the next phases of this project are, in my view, even much more of greater value. This launch is just the beginning of a process, as we have been told, a process of engagement across society to refine these scenarios and to develop focus scenarios for specific sectors. In my engagement with them, I said you could even paint a 4th scenario, a much more scary scenario about horrible things that could happen in our country, where we should all be jacked into action and say, South Africa must never, ever go there. I said you could paint a picture where 75% of our people are out of work. You could paint a picture that paints a real horrible picture of our country. But of course, they are a lot wiser than I am. And in the end, they are painting a picture which really emanates and responds to the views that we are all expressing. The reason I said they could paint a 4th picture was to scare all of us, to scare us to make the right choices, all of us as a people, various sectors of society, so that we can move this country through a much better scenario that will be a better South Africa for the future. This process will provoke many South Africans to consider afresh the assumptions they have long held about their area of work, and will also challenge them to look at the future with a different perspective. This can only enrich the choices they need to make now to achieve better outcomes in the future. The idea that beyond the envisioned phase of engagement and further scenario development, this scenario could assist in forging a social compact may seem to be overly ambitious for many of us. That should not deter us, were it not for the ambition of those who sacrificed everything, who helped to prosecute the struggle for freedom. We would not today be living in a democracy defined by a progressive constitution and a Bill of Rights. If we are to forge a meaningful social compact that unites all South Africans behind a program of fundamental change, we need to have a common vision of where we want our country to go. These scenarios do assist us in defining that common vision. And the important thing is that as they unfold their program, many of us will be able to participate in the crafting and the development of this vision. For that, we are extremely grateful to the many architects of Indlulamithi. I would like to encourage you, Professor Fikeni, not to be deterred by the extent to which my kith and kin, us politicians, and other detractors may try to impinge on your work and how you should plan. And I'd like to say, do go ahead and produce insights which are much more richer than what we have had in the past. In the months to come, through many hours of passionate insight as well as debate, the number of architects should multiply and in time become the builders of a better future for all our people. By this I mean, as you engage with many more South Africans, I would regard those South Africans as the architects of the vision that we should now craft, a vision that should be able to define the future trajectory of our country. In all this, I do indeed see the genesis of the social compact that our country so sorely needs, a compact that will bind all of us together, that even as we continue to differ in Parliament and in many other forums in our country, we should know that we are bound together by a social compact that is able to form the pillars on which we can build a South Africa that will move towards 2030. We already have a national development plan which has been embraced by all and sundry. And the national development plan should be seen as the building blocks of where we want to go as South Africa. And through this process, I see you putting in place the legs that will make us move to the aspirations that we have all expressed through that national development plan. And I say to you, Professor Fikeni, with your colleagues, go with speed. We thank you for having come this far. And we would like to applaud you for this launch and wish you strength as you proceed to develop these scenarios. These scenarios will enable us to plan better for that South Africa that we all yearn for. Thank you very much for your work. Thank you.